Hello, welcome back to the RTS Masterclasses. It's great to see you all. I am Katie Razzall. I'm the BBC's culture and media editor, but you are definitely not here to see me. You are here to see this legend in his own lifetime and legend in this room. Jeremy Bowen, who is somebody whose his journalistic career has taken him around the world. Jeremy joined the BBC as a graduate news trainee in 1984. Most people in this room were definitely not even born and not even a twinkle in their parents' eyes then.
But their parents weren't born.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Jeremy, to bring that up.
Okay.
And he became foreign correspondent in 1987. He's reported for the BBC from more than 80 countries, including more than 20 wars, but is perhaps best known for his expertise in the Middle East. Jeremy, in case you don't know, has been injured in the field. He's seen a close colleague die. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And he has experienced through that process symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. His journalism has been recognised with many awards from, amongst others, the Royal Television Society. You can see that right there. They're hosting this.
Thank you.
BAFTA,
Yes.
Peabody. Well, we had 2 Emmys written down, and he said, actually, it might be 3, he just told me, but he can't remember. I think if I had an Emmy, I might remember, but that shows just quite how many he's got, how many awards and award ceremonies he's been to over the years. He was also awarded the Mungo Park Medal by the Royal Scottish Geographical Society in recognition of outstanding contributions and work to benefit to humanity in potentially hazardous physical and or social environments. And he's also written several books.
Mungo Park was a 19th century explorer who was eaten by a crocodile in Africa.
Something to aim for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stick with the Middle East, maybe. There aren't any crocodiles there,
Yeah.
I think. Might be wrong about that. We're really lucky, of course, to have Jeremy here. And if you're interested, he has written lots of books, including The Making of the Modern Middle East, which is a brilliant book. But
Great Christmas present.
exactly. But let's just start with big picture, Jeremy. What made you want to be a journalist? And when did you decide you did want to be a journalist?
I pretty much always wanted to be a journalist from when I realized when I was probably 9 or 10 that I wouldn't be either a footballer or an astronaut, which was the thing in the 60s, being an astronaut. And so, I mean, it was the sort of unattainable thing for me because my parents were both involved in the media. My mother was a photographer. She met my dad when she was working on a local newspaper in Merthyr Tydfil in South Wales. And he was working on the Western Mail, which is a Welsh daily out of Cardiff. So, you know, in our house, the news was always on. There were all the newspapers and magazines were always there. We even used to talk about it around the dinner table sometimes, what was going on in the world. I've got how many siblings have I got? I've got 4 other siblings.
Can't remember the Emmys. Can't remember the siblings.
Not good numbers.
Just remember before Christmas, because they all need presents.
Of my 4 siblings, none of them became journalists, actually, but I did, and I think it was because I wanted to see the world. I wanted to get round the world and be there when things were happening. When I was at school, I went to a comprehensive school in Cardiff. When we were about 15 or 16, they had a careers guy came around from the council, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm interested in journalism." He said, "Why are you interested in journalism?" He said, and I said, "Well, I'd like to travel the world and see things as they're going on." And then he said, "Well, you'll never get into journalism. First of all, you have to understand that. And second of all, if you want to see the world, you should become either a hotel manager or join the Royal Navy."
Did you think about it even for a second?
Well, I've stayed in so many hotels. I feel I could be a hotel manager because I know what it takes to be in a good hotel. But no, I didn't. I just thought, what a load of rubbish. You know, don't take a bad advice, guys. That's my advice.
That's very good advice. And what about, how did you get your first break in journalism? Was it the traineeship or was it before?
Well, I didn't do much student journalism because I went to UCL for my undergraduate degree, and I went to the university paper, and I thought they were all so horrible. I didn't go back again. And then when I did a postgraduate, I did a master's, which was in Italy and in America. And while I was in America, I worked for National Public Radio as an intern. But by then, I already got taken on into the BBC. I'd applied for the BBC scheme. And they told me afterwards, we didn't think you'd get in because you hadn't done enough student journalism, but you did a good board, as they say at the BBC. You did a good board, good interview, and you knew what was going on, so we thought we'd give you a chance.
It's always, when I moved to the BBC 10 years ago, I couldn't understand why people kept talking about boards, didn't know
board.
what they were talking about. It's the BBC's word for an interview, as
Yeah.
Jeremy's explained. Well, by the way, through this, it would be great to take questions. So I will start thinking if you've got questions, and at some point I'll come to you, and then again at the end. But it'd be great now just to see, we're going to see a few clips of Jeremy's work, and let's just begin with a clip from his most recent work, because of course you have been back and forward to Israel during the last 2 years of conflict. I'm sure people in the room will have seen you there. And this one is from 3 weeks ago when the ceasefire was coming into effect.
It must be a terrible journey, up to 20 miles on foot for thousands of Gaza's Palestinians, deprived by Israel's blockades of adequate food and clean water. A ride north in a car to Gaza City costs around £900. Impossible money for people who've lost everything. Earlier this morning, before Israel's military, the IDF, had pulled back, its tanks opened fire to warn the people not to move further along the road until the ceasefire. Crowd control, using shells. On social media, the IDF told them to stay on the coast road and warned that going near Israeli troops would endanger their lives. They're returning to a world of rubble in Gaza City. Fida Haraz wanted to find something, maybe a mattress, she said, as winter is coming. But she couldn't even find the ruins of her home, as there is so much destruction.
I knew it was levelled, but where is it? I can't find it. What do we do with our lives? Where will we live? It was a multi-storey building, but it's all gone.
It's clear that this last offensive by Israel into Gaza City flattened civilian homes on a massive scale. If that is without a military purpose, it amounts to a war crime. The IDF had pulled back to the agreed new line by around midday. It still leaves Israel occupying more than half of the Gaza Strip. Clause 4 of the ceasefire agreement says that the IDF will not return to areas they've withdrawn from as long as Hamas fully implements its side of the bargain. Is that Benjamin Netanyahu's decision? Donald Trump's? It's not clear. Potentially there are some big problems ahead in the implementation of the Trump 20-point peace plan, which is light on detail. Now, for example, it says that weapons must be placed permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning. There is no agreed process. Hamas wants to keep some weapons. Israel says they must all go.
So that was Jeremy. First, spontaneous burst of applause, come on. I suppose the thing first watching that, if you didn't know anything about the situation, you think it's Jeremy Bowen reporting from inside Gaza. Of course, it isn't, and we know why, because haven't been allowed into Gaza, apart from, I think you did go in with the IDF on one occasion.
Very early on, yeah.
Yeah. How difficult has it been to report this conflict when you as a journalist haven't been able to go in?
Extraordinarily difficult, really difficult. I'm a complete believer in eyewitness reporting, particularly on that kind of story. You get so much more from being in a place than you get through a screen. And early on, in the first week or so after the 7th of October attacks, the IDF took us into their border communities that had been attacked. When the army was still dug in, there was still shooting going on. They were still pulling out the bodies of Israelis who were being killed, and the Hamas fighters were basically rotting on the ground where they'd been killed. And they let us in there. Why? Because they wanted us to see it, with good reason. It's an entirely legitimate thing to do. So I have concluded that, and I'm not the only one, that the reason they have not let us into Gaza, except there are some very supervised trips you can do if the IDF decide to invite you, and I did one at the very beginning, it's because they've done things they don't want us to see. and they continue not to let us in because, you know, what's in it for Israel? If you think about it, you know, if people like me are nosing around when they are sort of unearthing a family from underneath a destroyed building where they've been rotting for, you know, down to the bone for the last 6, 9, 2 years, you know, months. I mean, it's going to make them look bad. And that, I believe, is why they won't let us in, why they continue not to let us in.
And of course, the way that you managed to do the coverage then is through trusted journalists inside Gaza. And obviously, we should pay tribute to the
we
brave
do a thing.
Palestinian journalists, many of whom have been killed.
More than 200,
experience,
more than
but-
200, yeah.
But that's how you've managed it.
Yeah, because we have a Palestinian producer whose only job in the office in Jerusalem is to liaise with freelancers who we work with in Gaza, who are all they're two or three young guys, basically. We did have 12 people working for us in Gaza full time and had been with the BBC for many, many years. One of them you may have seen on the 10 o'clock news from time to time, Rushdie Abu Alouf. I've known him for many, many years. He's a great journalist. But they all have families. They were older. They all have families. They wanted to get out. So the BBC helped them get out in the first few months of the war. But that meant that these others who were there, who kept on working, worked for us. It's a really unsatisfactory way to work, frankly. I mean, they have done an incredible job. We couldn't have done anything without them. And with other journalists who work for the news agencies, work for Reuters and so on. But for I mean, there's only one way to report a story, I think, like that, is to be there yourself. Because also, it gives another reason why access is restricted, is because it gives our critics, of which you may have noticed there are many, the chance to say, well, how the hell do they know what's going on? They're not even there. How do you know? I mean, who did you speak to?
You were saying earlier, when you were thinking about your career as a younger person, whether it was a teenager or whatever, you wanted to travel the world. But what was it that took you down the journalistic path of wanting to report conflict?
Well, I didn't really think I'd end up that way, actually. I thought if I had any ambition when I started out, I was just finished 5 years at university and I was 24 years old. I thought I would quite like to be the Washington correspondent because that seemed to be the top job. And actually, in recent times when the jobs come up, I didn't go for it because you apply for these things within. Sometimes you get approached, but basically you have to apply for things. And because I figured that the job that I have now, international editor, is so much more interesting and flexible, and I get around the place, and I like going to the Middle East, but not just the Middle East. I do quite a few. I try to do more other things. It's been difficult in recent years because there's been so much news. But no, I mean, I did my first war in El Salvador in 1989, and I was working in the Washington office at the time as a very junior reporter. You know, I was 28, 29. And the guy who was the top man at the time in Washington was a man called Martin Bell, always used to do the war in El Salvador. And there was a flare-up. There was this long-running civil war, basically, in El Salvador in Central America. And there was a big flare-up. There was a rebel offensive into the heart of the capital city, San Salvador. And to my absolute amazement, he said, "Do you want to go and do it?" I thought, oh, God, okay. These days, if you go into doing conflicts at the BBC or other big news organizations, you get training, hostile environments courses, flak jackets, first aid, nothing. I had nothing. I had no idea. I didn't even take a Band-Aids with me, frankly. And I remember getting on the plane thinking, geez, I forgot the Band-Aids. And so I was...
probably weren't going to help that much.
It probably wouldn't have helped. And so when I was packing, because I only had like half a day, you know, you want to go fine. Well, there's a flight to Miami and then on to San Salvador later on today. So I looked, I thought, what shall I take? And I took my trainers because I thought I'd be running quite a bit. We didn't have flak jackets, nothing like that, and it was dangerous. But the journalist was killed the day I arrived, a very well-known Sunday Times journalist.
My friend's dad, David Blundy.
Blundy, yes. Oh, I know. I've met his daughter. Yeah, your friend. Yeah, he was killed the day I arrived. Blundy. I never knew him. But we arrived.
Picture of his dead body was put on the front page of the Sun the next day, which was a
I didn't know that.
horrendous
No, not nice.
experience for his family.
I bet it was horrendous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first time, and you know, to start, I was somewhat seduced by the experience, I have to say, because it was like being in your own war movie. I thought as a rather immature young man, it was exciting. It's very exhilarating the first time that well, it was for me anyway. You're lying in the gutter, which is where, of course, where many people believe journalists naturally belong. You know, you could hear bullets going over your head, and I thought, my God, this is something. And I mean, it was quite a immature reaction, I have to say. But
The empathy came later.
yeah, I had empathy then, but I was more interested in trying to get through the day. I was working with these Salvadorian camera crews who worked for Viz News, which was came before Reuters TV. And for them, it was just another day at the office. They've been covering the Civil War for years. We just jump in the back of a pickup and drive towards the smoke and the flame. And so I saw a dead body for the first time. I had no idea how I'd respond. I was okay. I didn't faint or vomit or worse. And I soon realized, because it turned out, yeah, I'll be honest with you, it was a somewhat careerist. I was a very ambitious little person, and I realized that there was one way of getting my head above the crowd of the competition. You know, journalism, as they would say, is a dog-eat-dog trade. And so I figured, no, I can do this. I don't mind doing it. Because when you're young, you feel indestructible, at least I did. As the years have gone by, I've absolutely realized that we are totally destructible. My attitudes are totally different now. And it was actually fairly soon after that. I did numbers of wars in the 90s, the first Gulf War in Baghdad, and then I got very, very involved in the wars of former Yugoslavia.
In fact, we're gonna see.
Great, which was I felt was really passionate about.
Well, this is the second clip. This is Kosovo and the Balkans in 1999.
Down a leafy lane, where quiet people lived quiet lives, war has left waste, death, and hate. Serbs and Albanians were side by side in these hamlets. The Albanians say their Serb neighbors turned into their persecutors, their murderers. Now they've gone, they're looting and burning their houses.
There are scores to settle here, unfinished business to complete with people whose names they know, before they can even start thinking about the future. No Albanian in this area is talking about reconciliation. What they want is revenge.
More smoke was rising from Serb houses when they decided it was safe to give Halil Ali Nikshi a decent burial. They exhumed his remains from a temporary grave near the place he was killed. I can't take any more of this. His uncle was collapsing. The dead man was 29, a teacher, father of 4, and the last Albanian the Serb paramilitaries killed as they sprayed the village with bullets on their way out. May the ground on you be light, Halil, his uncle said as they buried him. The funeral was over by the time that Yevdet Gashi arrived home. While he was away fighting in the Kosovo Liberation Army, the Serbs killed his father and 14 relatives. His cousin Isa Gashi was almost one of them. On the morning of May the 14th, he survived a firing squad in this room. The executioners told them, in the name of Serbia, you're going to die. They opened fire. Isa was shielded by the bodies of his brother and a friend, who collapsed onto him and took the bullets. In another house that same morning, Rej Isuf Kelmendi survived as well. He ducked as the Serbs opened fire. Again, the bullets hit his cousins and brothers, and he ran for his life. I was here. I was already dead. The Serbs were locals. They spoke Albanian. How can we live with them again? I've got to look after 12 children whose fathers have been killed. Human ash and bone cover the floor. Even though the bodies were burnt, the house stinks of rotting flesh. That day the Serbs killed 42 people. They're still searching the ruins, but they think in all 85 died here during the war. Life has come down to scavenging, mourning, burying, burning, remembering, and regretting. Mrs. Halili's 2 sons, grown men, were taken from her and shot dead. If only I'd been with them, I would have squashed those Serbs flat. She hardly noticed, too worried that she hadn't saved her children. Everybody here seems lost, wandering into what's left of their lives, certain only that if Serbs come back, they'll kill them. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Razzall, Kosovo.
Nice moustache.
Nice head of hair.
I mean, I'm joking there, but obviously it's a really powerful report. Like, so
Well, I got that one out because I wanted to make a few points about the way we did it. Because one of the problems with working in daily television news, especially when there's a really big story, is that they want something every day. And it was the case then, that was 26 years ago. But it's even more the case now. The BBC machine is monstrous in terms of its demands. And so now there's much more. In those days, we weren't doing lives, I think we did 24-hour news, but it was only just in its infancy. So I wanted to get deeper into a story, because simply trying to turn around something on the day every day is you just get, it's skin deep. And so I had this idea of going to find a village, and I thought about, the radio soap opera, The Archers, which is set in a village, and there are farmers and people living there. And of course, there's no war going on, but they have dramas. So luckily we have good resources. We had, and we still get good resources actually. So I was working with several very good camera crews and producers. And so we decided to send one of them off, a guy called Nick Mellard, who I still work with. I worked with first in Libya in 1991. And he went off with a producer for a couple of days, did a little bit of shooting, but mostly was researching, found the massacre site, the survivors. They really nailed down the story. The producer did, who was Kosovo Albanian. And then I went in because I was doing other stuff with other teams, and we were trying to sort of piggyback, as it were, overlap, And so we were able, I felt, with that, and I still think, in modesty, I'd say it stands up. I mean, the woman at the end, I still feel that, ooh, when I hear her. I mean, we were able to do that because we were, it was probably a week's work in that. And that's the issue is often that, is trying to, especially now when there is so much demand to be live and to be quick and to be on air, getting into it is a big challenge. That was one way. And I think at that time in BBC TV News, we weren't doing too much of that. And now we're a bit better at it, actually.
I remember when I covered the Grenfell Tower fire, I was working with a cameraman who had done a lot of foreign reporting, probably with you as partly. But when this was obviously in London, here in our capital city, and there were quite a lot of foreign crews. And he said he was really shocked. We were both really shocked by how sort of in your face those foreign crews were to British people, which we weren't being, because here we were in Britain. And he said, but it makes me think back to the times that I was in Africa and we were filming a funeral of somebody's child who died, and we were right in there, and it made me feel embarrassed or ashamed about how we'd been. And I wonder for you, how did you then, and do you think your thoughts have evolved on how you deal with the fact that, you're intruding in a sense on people's misery and grief? Have you ever decided not to film something? And
Oh yeah, I have, yeah. I mean, I became very aware during the years of the siege in Sarajevo, particularly, which was between 92 and 95. And I would do with other, I would do a sort of 4 or 5 week stint. It was dangerous to get in. Sometimes you fly. It was dangerous the whole time. You could be shelled at or shot in any number of places. And we would, the way I started thinking about it was that we were coming into people's lives at their very worst moment, because every day people were getting killed. And rightly or wrongly, I think, I came to the conclusion that the politics, I followed the politics, but I don't think in the TV coverage we had enough of it in there explaining why they were fighting enough. It got down more to atrocities. And I mean, I remember we'd sometimes go up to the graveyard. There was a central cemetery in the middle of Sarajevo, where there would be, they would be burying people, or the hospital. And I remember interviewing a guy whose entire family had been killed that morning. He had just gone out to try and get some paracetamol from a neighbor. Then the house got hit. His wife, his kids, his mother, I think it was, were all dead, and he was burying them right in front of us. And I was talking to him as he was filling in the grave. And what I've found actually is you really have to be careful, because people in that situation are actually normally very happy to talk.
Because they're in shock.
They're in shock. They want to talk. There was, particularly it was early in the war, there was still quite a strong element of trust with foreign media. They thought that if they told us their stories, there would be some help from the outside world. It was a few years in, they would basically tell us to get lost, because and I'd say, well, you'll get your message out. They say, you said that to us 2 years ago. And there was a lot of hostility by then. But at that particular thing, they thought it was their route out to the outside world.
Yeah.
And so no, I'm very well, I am aware of that. And there are times when we have put the camera away, but not because something's horrible or because it's necessary, but because I'm waiting for the best moment to do it. In a sense, it's almost cold-blooded about it. We're there for a reason. I'm there to report what's going on. I'm not there to give people necessarily, I think there's too much sanitization of the news. And if we start sanitizing the news gathering process, you need the material. You can decide later how you use it. But you should always, what you have to retain, as otherwise, to be honest, to be absolutely selfish, people won't talk to you, is human empathy. I think that a really important quality, certainly for someone who's done the reporting that I've done over many years, is to be empathetic. And part of the challenge of being a reporter is trying to get the people back home understand what it's like to be that person, to be in their shoes. And you can only do that if you can feel some empathy yourself about it, and you have to try. So I've always felt empathetic about it, but I've also felt we've got to get it done, and we've got to get it done now because time's going by, and we're always, you're always under pressure.
Talking of time going by, we're already halfway through and we haven't taken any questions.
Righty.
Is there anybody, we've got microphones, microphones even, I think. So how about that hand at the back and this hand at the front this time? But we will take more questions, so don't worry, we'll come back to you. Whoever gets the
I'll try and do shorter
first.
answers so we can cover more ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean that. I don't mean exactly. You speak however much you like.
No.
So, you want to go first?
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Kasanga said I'm from Guinea-Bissau, and I'm in the University of Roehampton. I just wonder, it's difficult right now sometimes to speak freely, and your position as a reporter is very important. During this whole conflict, we've seen many characters like Gary Linker and Paul Bristol that at some point they risked their job for comments they did during the...
You're talking about during the Gaza war?
Yeah. During the conflict. So what's your perspective as someone that works for BBC on the whole concept of being able to just report what's true and what's not?
Well, to answer that, I think it's a pretty straightforward answer. No one has ever told me what to say.
Good.
No one has told me not to say things. I've reported things always, and in my scripts, that I understand to be as true. The legendary Woodward and Bernstein, who uncovered the Watergate cover-up and scandal, and which led to the resignation of President Nixon. They talk about the best obtainable version of the truth. And that's what I try and go for, the best obtainable version of the truth. And what I don't do, though, is put my own opinions in there. Because at the BBC, we have this word impartiality, which a lot of people sneer at, but I think it's really important. And so there are plenty of times in my life when, as a reporter, when I've thought, bloody hell, this is awful. And early on, I was quite tempted. I'll give you a very quick example. In Sarajevo, I talked about that cemetery. We were there once for the funeral of some kids who had been killed, little kids. One was a baby and one was a toddler, who'd been shot by snipers in a bus when they were being evacuated, from shots coming from the Serb side. And they shelled their funeral, wounded the grandmother. She had a massive hole in her arm. We did first aid for her and took her to the hospital. The kids were just running, the kids from the children's home that these people had come from. These kids had come from. I'd seen the bodies of the children. I'd done the whole earlier story. And then when the funeral was shelled, I was absolutely appalled. I was appalled. And I was going to do a piece to camera that said, this is the most appalling moment. I thought, no, actually, it's not about me. It's not what I think. So what I did was I did a very factual report about a horrific situation, which we had great coverage of in terms of pictures. It was way more powerful that way around. And later on, when they did the war crimes investigations in the tribunal of the former Yugoslavia, it was admitted as evidence in the trials of the two main Bosnian Serb leaders, Karadzic and Mladic. And had I got on my soapbox and said, I'm really angry about this. So the point is, I don't believe I've ever been in a situation where my job's been at risk. I feel I have a lot of backing from the BBC to tell it as I see it. However, yes, I could get a lot more. The fact that we're not in there ourselves means sometimes you have to pull back, but you can't prove things because you haven't seen them for yourself. That's the problem.
And the other question here?
Hello, my name is Razzall, and I study at the University of the Creative Arts. Kind of bouncing off the same question, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the genocide in Gaza. I was just going to say, did your journalism ever feel complete, and are you encouraged to give historical context for why the things are happening now? Because we look at news now and it's always the current or why things are the way they are, not necessarily why historically it's come to be that way.
I always try and put historical context in. I've written books about the history of the region. My current book is called The Making of the Modern Middle East, which is a history. And if you watch what we said, what I do, you'll see plenty of that. There are problems sometimes getting it in. If you're working on the main evening news, which is my principal job, I suppose, and I do a lot on the Today program in the mornings as well, there often isn't the space. So you have to allude to things. One of the things about television reporting particularly, I think, is that you have to try and do a story which is, I used to think of it as like a layer cake, actually. Layers of meaning in it. And so, because, if you work for the FT or for the Sun or the Daily Mail, you have a very good idea of who your readership might be. If you work for a major world broadcaster like the BBC, then it's people all over the world and all kinds of people. You have no idea who's switched on. And there could be people who switched on who know everything about the story, and people who switched on who are kind of interested, but don't know much themselves in terms of detail. So you've got to try and make the script work in such a way that someone who really knows very little about it will get something out of it, and someone who knows a great deal about it might think, oh, that's an interesting nuance. So I think of it in terms of layers in the way that so don't assume knowledge, always assume people are intelligent. And I mean, that for me is one of the interesting challenges. For me, half of the job, I like going out and getting the material, but over the years, some of the most satisfying moments have been when you've got a really great set of rushes in television news, and you sit down with the editor, and you've got time to put together a considered piece, and getting the words right and the background and trying to get the understanding right is, for me, one of the most satisfying challenges of the job. And actually, sometimes we succeed less well, sometimes we don't succeed. I mean, part of that is the strength of the material you get. It's if you write for a newspaper or a website, you can say a lot more easily than if you are having to actually sometimes even be there yourself.
Now we do it all at the same time. But let's come back.
Yeah,
to
we
a
do.
clip,
We
another
right
clip.
to, yeah.
These are two short extracts from interviews with the then leader of Libya, Colonel Gaddafi, in 2011, and then with the President Bashar al-Assad of Syria in 2015. Both of them, just to be clear, I'm sure you know this, were dictators at war with their own people.
It was Colonel Gaddafi's first interview for Western journalists since this crisis started.
No demonstration at all in the streets. أنت شفت مظاهرات؟
Did you see demonstrations?
Yes, I have, yes.
Where?
I saw some today. I
Where?
saw some in Zawiya. Yesterday I saw demonstrations.
هذه supporting us.
No, they're not supporting
They are
us.
not against us.
Some were against you and some were for you.
No, no one against us. Against me for what? Because I am not president. They love me, all my people with me. They love me all.
Mr. Assad's appearance now in a guest house at the presidential palace in Damascus is a sign he feels more secure.
What about barrel bombs? You don't deny that your forces use them.
I know about the army. They use bullets, missiles, and bombs. I haven't heard of army using barrels or maybe cooking pots.
Large barrels full of explosives and projectiles which are dropped from helicopters and explode with devastating effect. There's been a lot of testimony about these things.
They're called bombs.
Well, so there we go. Colonel Gaddafi is dead and Assad is living in Russia.
Somewhere.
Just
Yeah.
a sort of helpful picture perhaps for people thinking about being journalists. It's just about preparation. I mean, how much preparation goes into doing those interviews? How do you prepare for them? And indeed, how do you get access to people like that?
Well, the Gaddafi one, 2011, Arab uprising, started in Tunisia, moved on to Egypt, and it was all happening really, really quickly. One would start somewhere, it was like a bushfire spreading. So getting into Libya was quite difficult on the regime side. And in the end, they let in a small group of us to start with. And everybody wanted to get the Gaddafi interview. Everybody wanted to get it.
That's where you get your elbows out.
Yes, and we all thought we had great contacts. In the end, it came through a very good friend of mine, Marie Colvin, who was a Sunday Times reporter who was killed in Syria a year later, 2 years later, maybe. And
Already interviewed, hadn't he? He'd given her that special present, as I remember.
well, she had a long relationship
Yeah.
with the Gaddafis. I mean,
Loved her.
it came through as well, his son, Saif. And they said, Marie, we want to give you an interview. We want to give a world broadcaster an interview. We want to give an American broadcaster an interview. So Christiane Amanpour, who at that time was working for ABC News of America, and was the American, and I was the world broadcast. We were all friends. We'd known each other for many, many years. So basically, she asked her friends to come in and do these things. And I had almost no notice at all. The guy came up to us, who was the son of the head of intelligence, who was killed subsequently, who was like a sort of designer urban guerrilla in this beautiful 5-star hotel we were staying in. But, he had the growth of stubble. He had a beautiful sort of combat jacket, but it was the kind that Italian tourists wear that costs 500 euros. And, lovely sort of commando cap, but it was cashmere. And the Libyan regime guys, they love dressing up. And so he said, the leader is ready for you. The leader is ready for you. And I was wearing, because television is live TV can be quite a top up, waist up thing. So I had a decent enough jacket and tie, a jacket and shirt, no tie. And I was wearing a fairly manky pair of jeans because I had to climb up on the roof to get to the live camera. And I said, and we're just outside my hotel room. And I said, Mohammed, wait a second, I've got a suit. Brought a suit he said, he looked me up and down. He said, Jeremy, no, it is war. Jeans are fine, come with me. So we went there and basically we the three of us interviewed him. I'd been thinking about the issues, but I hadn't sort of war gamed it in any sense. The Assad thing was very different. They had
time on that. And
I had done him previously before the war, and his people got in touch and said, 4 months previously, before that, and they said, we're going to give a foreign broadcaster an interview, and it's going to be you. I said, great. We need to negotiate. So we negotiated a great deal, the way it was going to be broadcast, the length of time. And we had to do it. We'd agreed to broadcast an uncut version. And the slot on the BBC was 23 minutes. So it had to be 23 minutes. But then we also agreed to take clips out, and they were going to broadcast it on Syrian TV as well. Syrian TV built a set, provided the crew. Then the night before, Assad's media woman, who was killed last year in very questionable circumstances, and the suggestion was that she was, before the fall of Assad, the suggestion was she was done in by someone in the regime. She said the night before, she rang me up, and we'd been negotiating, and I'd been wargaming the questions, and we had extensive briefs and background info and things to come back at him. You know, if I say this, he'll say that, I'll come back with that. So different options to do that. We really thought it through. I was very happy with the interview. It went really well. It was a powerful interview and newsmaking and the rest of it. But the night before, this woman, Luna, got in touch with me and she said, come to the palace, we need to talk. Went to the palace. She was, you know, very, how can I put this? Very elegant, well turned out, intelligent, capable woman who used every ounce of her charm and intelligence to persuade me to let her into the edit room to help select the clips of Assad.
And you said yes.
And I said, you have got to be joking, Luna. It's not going to happen. She said, she got a little bit seductive at this point. She said, Jeremy. And she leant over and put her hand on my knee. She said, it'll be our secret. All the other guys have done the same deal.
Wow.
I said, it's not going to be me, Luna. And I went back, I told the bosses in London, went to the Director General. No, of course not. I said, I couldn't have done it under those circumstances. I was feeling, everybody was there. We had a big team. The set was built. I went back to my hotel room and I thought I was going to throw up because
you thought
turned
you
us
lost the
down.
interview?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because we wouldn't do it. And then the phone went about an hour later and it was her number 2. Saying, Ms. Luna has changed her mind, you will be able to do it. And we called their bluff.
Hold your nerve.
And yes, and of course it was because Assad was expecting to do an interview and she would have, and it was already being promoted on Syrian TV. And how were they going to pull it? So having said that, I literally thought I was going to vomit when I said, look, in that case, we can't do it. And I mean, I thought that moment, it just showed the absolute lack of compassion he had for essentially the Assad family destroyed the country, killed at least 500,000 people to save their regime.
Yeah. Well, let's move on a little bit to another clip. We've now moved to 2013, and this time it's the time of the Arab Spring uprisings we were mentioning before. This is Egypt, where there's been a controversial military coup against the elected government. Let's just look at this.
Supporters of President Morsi marched to a military compound, the Officers' Club of the Presidential Guard. Soldiers were waiting, equipped for trouble. Many in the crowd believe that this is where the army is holding President Morsi. An officer warned them not to cross the road in front of the base. He told them they were free to demonstrate if they did not. But the crowd got bigger and more angry. Marshals from the Muslim Brotherhood couldn't hold them back. Seconds after they spilled into the road, soldiers started shooting live bullets into the air. Less than a minute later, I saw army gun barrels lowered and firing into the crowd. A man was killed instantly. Other protesters tried first aid to save a wounded man. He said, "They've attacked our brothers. This is forbidden. It's not accepted by God. They've attacked our brothers and killed us." The army fired tear gas and shotguns into the crowd. The BBC team was in a group that was hit by shotgun pellets.
There are powerful forces arrayed against each other in this country.
On one hand, the Muslim Brotherhood, with deep roots in the community, can put a lot of people onto the streets. On the other, the army seized control of the country and wants to hold it. Unless they can channel all of this into political action and not into street protest, it's a recipe for more violence.
We haven't got a great deal of time left.
I'll keep
I
it tight.
do really want to talk to you about the personal toll that your job must have on you. You've been injured several times. It looks like you were...
Well, I had pellets in my head and in my leg. And when I got back to London, I had a 2-hour operation to get them taken out.
And yet there you were reporting having
Well,
happened.
I figured, I knew I wasn't going to die. And I thought, I've made all this effort. Jesus Christ, we've got to do a piece here.
But I mean, you've also obviously experienced the awful, death of a comrade in front of you. So for you personally, how do you deal with this? I've had so many conversations with my foreign correspondent friends, and they seem all right, and then much later they start saying, "Oh yes, well actually I'm struggling with terrible PTSD, or I think my job's taken a great toll on me, and actually I'm finding it difficult to cope now in my 60s or whatever." How do you deal with it?
Well, I'm in my 60s. The job takes over your life. I know lots of people have been killed. In 2000, the incident you referred to, my friend Abed Takush, who was our driver and fixer in Lebanon, was killed by the Israelis. I just got out of the car with the cameraman, and the Israelis fired a tank shot into the back of the car and killed him. And he just emerged somehow with his last breath. He managed to pull himself out of the window, and he was on fire and slumped down onto the road. And we couldn't get up there. And when I tried to get up there, I said to the cameraman, who was Lebanese, I said, "Malik, we've got to get up." He said, "Don't, Jeremy, he's dead. If you go up there, they'll kill you." And when, after about 5-10 minutes, I couldn't stand it, we were undercover. I stuck my head out. They opened up with a heavy machine gun. And we have information from the Israeli side that that's what they knew we were there, and they were trying to kill us. So after that, I had symptoms of PTSD, which involved bad dreams, kind of flashbacks, hypervigilance. When you think something terrible is going to happen, you jump at sudden noises. I came back for some therapy in London. I was in the taxi queue at Paddington Station, and I found myself calculating what I would do if the place came under fire. Where I would take cover, how I would escape the mortar bombs. I thought, wait a minute, we're in London. It's not going to be happening here. But I didn't develop the full-blown condition because I had some timely therapy. Subsequently, it's life on the road, really. It's not so much the horror of some stuff, and most journalists are not exposed to that kind of thing. I've chosen to have a career where I've gone to some very difficult and demanding places because I find that interesting, and I want to be there at those places, and also working in the Middle East, particularly, and also, Ukraine and the world is a violent place. If you're not prepared to go and take a look at that, you can't really be a foreign correspondent, I think, if you're doing that sort of regional stuff. And it's the wear and tear of life on the road as much as seeing dead bodies and close calls. I've had numbers of close calls. I've been arrested. I've been held in jails and scared out of my wits at times, thinking I'm going to die now and things like that. But it's more, the rest of your life can wither away because the job takes so much. It's hard to have the emotional space sometimes for other things, or I used to find this. I'm better now. So that wear and tear is difficult. And then 2017, I had made all kinds of wrong turnings in my life, and the job was just sucking everything out of me. I just got terrible depression. And we were going to Yemen, which again was a bit of a dodgy place. And we were in Djibouti, which is a dreadful place. And it was really getting me down. And anyway, we were about to get on the plane. And I just said to the team, I said, "Guys, I can't do it. I cannot do this. So without the reporter, you can't do it." So we all went home. I said to the boss, I said, "Look, I've got to take some time off. I cannot do this." They were very good, actually. I had a lot of therapy. I think in some ways it saved my life, actually. And it took quite a time. And other things happened which turned into positives. And anyway, mentally, I mean, I was taking medication, quite a lot of it, all prescribed. In the end, I came out the other side fine, actually. I think mentally, I'm in a good place. I don't take meds, haven't for quite a few years now. And I think I have a sane approach to what at times is a completely insane job, because I am aware of the cost. I mean, my kids are now grown up, they're in their 20s. I wasn't at home enough when they were probably needed me, you know, as a father, when I wasn't there enough. And I used to fool myself that I could get back and do quality time, but you actually need to be there at the trivial times, actually, because they're not trivial for the kids. And yeah, so I regret that, but you know, that was the way it was. And
I imagine everyone in this room is incredibly appreciative of your honesty. That's really...
you know, if you want to get into this, you need to know.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, and we will take a couple of questions. We've got 5 minutes left. I was going to say, what you have given us over the last 55 minutes is in a sense an illustration of the wonderful things that your job has given you, but also the trade-offs and the difficulties that come with a job as demanding as yours.
Everything in life has a price, and sometimes things which are worth it have a heavy price. And I think that being a foreign correspondent, or being, you know, a producer, or someone, one of the camera team, or, you know, we work in quite big teams. It's not just the guy on TV. It takes over your life. It shapes the person you are and become. And and actually, you won't become successful unless you're prepared to deal with that. And what I would say to people is, sort out your personal life. If you've got a good base at home, it makes it easier. And I've had a reasonable base. That helps.
Let's put the lights on. We have only got 4 minutes, so maybe we could just take a couple of questions. I promised I would take the blonde young woman there in the white shirt, and then how about you in the front row? Sorry, I would love to take more, but let's see.
My name is Honey, and I'm a trainee broadcast journalist. Obviously, you have reported from numerous dangerous situations. With the rise of extremist beliefs at the minute, how can we as journalists protect ourselves from hostility when reporting?
And should we just take the other question at the same time, because then we'll know how long we've got.
Hi, I'm Alessio from Italy. I wanted to ask you how in those so difficult moments you find the power to speak into the camera, which is the same power your colleagues find to hold that camera while 2 seconds before they heard bullets and bombs behind them.
Deal with that one first. You've got to be prepared for it. Say that piece to camera I did after I was shot, where I had blood on me, I'd worked out already what I wanted to say. And I was ready for the moment when the time would come to do a piece to camera, because for me, the important thing is if you start saying, well, it's a terrible scene behind me, just look, it hasn't worked. You need a big thought. So I often turn up at a place like that thinking, I'm going to do a piece to camera at some point. What is the big thought? What is the big thought? And yes, it was at a I was painful, but so I think it's about preparation, really, and also expecting. And once you get experienced, you know roughly the kinds of things that might happen. On the other point, do you mean sort of extremist beliefs back home here? And a lot of this has come out in the course of the Gaza war, because there's something about the Arab-Israeli conflict that makes people very, very angry, whichever side of the argument you're on. Look, on the way here, I will expurgate the language. I was walking down from Waterloo Bridge, and someone, a bloke, probably 70-ish, was there with his wife, walking the opposite direction. I was walking downstairs. He said to me, "Jew hater." I said, "What?" And we had a forthright exchange of views. I'll put it no more graphically than that. Suffice it to say, it was an absolute... He said, the things you've reported have caused people to be murdered. I've had those encounters many times. I've also had encounters with people. I did a talk at UCL, and there was a demonstration where about a dozen Palestinian supporters of Palestine leapt up and one of them was screaming at me, you're complicit in genocide. Why don't you say it's a genocide? I've reported using that word and the whole concept and explained it many times. And I tried to reason with them. I absolutely couldn't. They were just screaming slogans at me. This goes with the territory. How do you guard against this? Got to grow a thick skin. And also be confident in your journalism, because guess what? It may sound arrogant. I've done my homework. I've done the hard yards over many years. I've talked to loads of people. I've seen many things. And I'm telling you, when I report something, I'm confident in it. But, you know, getting to that place, you do have to get a thick skin.
And that is a moment to end it on. All it remains to do now, really, is to thank you, of course, for all being here and listening so intently, but of course, mainly to thank Jeremy Bowen, who, well, the BBC is certainly grateful to him. We are today.
Thank you.